Well, thank you, everybody. This is Dr. Scott Uhall. I appreciate you showing up to this coffee chat this time. And let me go back to the front. There we go. Today, we're going to talk about body composition. And it's not just weight that's important, but we want to know what makes up your body weight. And by measuring body composition, we can do that really well. So today, this is the third installment of our 5 components of the health-related components of fitness. And like I said, body composition is what we're covering tonight. And a little bit about myself before we go into this, but a lot of people ask what's the difference between my doctorate and a medical doctor. And again, I have a PhD in what's called health promotion, and that's developing and living a lifestyle that really optimizes quality of life and good health. So that's nutrition, stress management, quality sleeping, and so forth. A medical doctor, an MD or a DO, they take care of individuals after a chronic disease has been diagnosed. So if you had high cholesterol or high blood pressure, you want to see a medical doctor to get support with that, with pharmaceutical medications and so forth. And probably the big thing is that I cannot dispense or pharmaceutical meds or anything like that. My specialty is in behavior change. And so again, I just wanted to point that out. Both doctors are extremely important. And they can complement each other when they work together. So I wanted to make sure I shared that with you. Well, let's get after. We got a quarter hour of wellness power coming up, and we're going to talk about some body composition, like I said. So if you have any questions, please throw those into the chat forum, and I'll answer those at the end of the program. And once again, I'd like to say thank you to Kangaroo Coffee for sponsoring our virtual coffee chats this year. It's a great support and a great resource for us to present information out to the Fill On group. So thanks again, Kangaroo Coffee. Now, as always, medical disclaimer, anything that you do, if you're going to start a physical activity program, if you haven't talked to your physician in quite some time, please give them a call and tell them what you're doing. Maybe schedule your annual physical and get all that done. You don't want to hurt yourself while you're trying to go out and make yourself better. All right, let's get into body composition. Well, what exactly is body composition? Well, it's an assessment that we can use to determine the amount of body fat, which is called adipose tissue, from all other tissue in your body. And that's commonly known as lean body mass. And lean body mass is made up of your muscles, your bones, your organs, blood, and so forth. And it's a fairly constant value, with the exception of non-essential body fat and muscle tissue. Those two can change quite a bit based on how you eat and what you eat, believe it or not. And we talked about catabolism last time in muscular strength and endurance. You can actually lose lean body mass, muscle mass, if you don't eat appropriately. And we're going to try to tie that in with our conversation today. So now, what are we actually talking about with body composition? Well, body composition is the result of the energy balance equation, where the calories that we consume drive the amount of activity that we do. And so on the left-hand side, you can see energy in. Those are things like proteins, fats, carbs, common things that you're probably familiar with. But alcohol, when you drink alcohol, it's actually got 7 calories per gram. And then there are sugar alcohols like maltitol and sorbitol that are added to foods. And you need to be careful about eating those man-made sugar alcohols, because if you eat too many of them, it can give you some gastric distress. And we don't want that in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Now, on the energy outside of the equation, that's really metabolism. I've mentioned that in our previous conversations, but all this running around and exercise that we do, walking, whatever that might be, that accounts for about up to 30% of our metabolic needs. Converting food for an apple, for example, and converting that into glucose or something our body can use, that takes up to about 15% of our metabolic need. And the big factor with metabolism and body comp is this thing called resting metabolism. And the greater your lean body mass is, the higher your resting metabolism is. In fact, compared to a kilogram of body fat, it only takes about 30 calories a day to keep alive, where that same amount of lean body mass, believe it or not, takes about 150 calories a day to keep alive. It's almost 10 times more metabolically active than body fat. So We want a high resting metabolism. Now, how do you measure that? Well, believe it or not, there's a number of ways. There's one called underwater weighting, which is the gold standard, but it's kind of difficult and you need a lot of stuff to do it. But there's a thing called a skin fold caliper. You can see that on the right-hand side. And what we're really measuring is what you can see on the left-hand side, subcutaneous body fat. That's a sagittal section of a bicep. You can see the bone in the middle, the muscles, the red part. But I can actually pinch your subcutaneous body fat with that skin fold caliper and get a measurement. And you can see those measurements down on the bottom, what's considered lean, optimal, overweight, unhealthy, or obese. And I want to spend a minute talking about this word obesity, if you would. All it truly means is that if you're a man, more than 25% of your total mass is made up of body fat. And if you're a woman, that's 30%. And just like having high cholesterol or high blood pressure, when you have an excess amount of 25 or 30%, gender speaking, it's a risk factor for chronic health issues like heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and those kinds of things, high blood pressure. So we want to really try to keep your body composition under 25 and under 30%. And some people might ask, how come the ladies get another 5% benefit? It has everything to do with raising children. There's a lot of hormones that are fat-based or fat-soluble, estrogen and progesterone, for example, that have a lot to do with making babies. And as a result of women being able to do that and not men, they actually need to have a little bit more body fat so that children or babies can be raised, born, whatever you want to call it there, in a healthy fashion. So one thing I do want to mention, it's kind of a trend. It's happened over the last 40 or 50 years or so. And somehow in America, we've developed an epidemic, maybe even a pandemic of obesity. And what this graph shows you right here is based on age. You can see on the bottom, and then on the left-hand side, on the vertical axis, you can see the percentage of individuals falling in those age categories that actually have obesity in their life. And if you can look at it, some of the values from the 40 to 59, 60 to 79 range in the females, we can get up to about 40%. And that's really, really high. That's going to cause a lot of stress on our bodies as we get older. And one thing I want to mention is that commonly, unlike having high cholesterol or high blood pressure, there's a social element to obesity. And a lot of people, they characterize themselves, or they scrutinize themselves based on their body composition. And even though someone might have high cholesterol, they don't really worry about that too much. But having a high body composition, that causes a lot of social stress. And I don't think anyone lives a lifestyle to get that. But unfortunately, our bodies can only respond to the foods that we eat. We can't predict, and we end up increasing our body composition, not really do anything of our own that we've done wrong. But there's a lot of misinformation out there. For example, people think eat less and do more and lose weight. That's true to a point, but it's not universally true. Now, moving ahead, one thing, not all tissue is created equal. If you look on the right-hand side, 5 pounds of muscle is about half the size of 5 pounds of body fat. So if you gain 5 pounds of muscle and lost 5 pounds of body fat, your weight would not change, but your clothes would fit quite a bit looser because, again, muscle is much more concentrated than body fat. And one thing I want to mention that we talked about last time, the catabolism concept. When you're not eating, you go long periods of time without eating, your body still has to have energy, glucose, and so it metabolizes lean body tissue first to get at the sugar that's in that muscle. And you can actually develop an unhealthy or disproportionate amount of lean muscle to body fat. And that's what I call skinny fat. A person is of the appropriate weight for their height, but they're tremendously undermuscular. And that can lead to frailness as you get older, osteoarthritis, that sarcopenia, which is age-related muscle wasting. And we talked about those in our previous chat. So be careful about that. Now, I've actually written a little brochure on really managing your blood sugar. And if there's any way that we could work together, you'd like to try to improve your body composition or actually see how your nutrition is, we can do that. I've got some really nice software. We can analyze your diet from A to Z and give you some great suggestions on managing your body composition and your blood sugar in general. And here's what I'm talking about with the blood sugar. One of the things that you really don't want to do is overeat large amounts of food. And to top that off, if you go a long period of time without eating and then eat a large amount of food, it actually causes what you see on this chart here. It elevates your blood sugar, and instead of using the food that you just ate for immediate energy, it tries to store it as body fat. And we don't want to do that. So overeating is really something that we want to try to avoid. Undereating does a little bit of a different deal, hypoglycemia, but it doesn't really cause the increase in body composition like not eating and then eating big amounts of food, which typically do. Now, I'd kind of like to summarize things and give you some ideas of choices that influence our body composition. And on the left, these are good choices to help us manage it. And that's things like eating fresh produce every day, fruits and vegetables, drink lots of water. Last week, we talked about getting quality protein and your essential amino acids. That's really important. I would encourage you to shop the perimeter of a grocery store more so than the aisles, because that's where your fresh produce, your fresh food, and all that stuff is. Most of your processed foods are in the aisles. And if you can, try to eat fruits in the morning. There's more sugar content to fruits than there is vegetables. Plus, you're more active during the day. So that's kind of giving your gas tank a full gas tank full of glucose. Vegetables, again, not so much sugar, and you're less active at night. So a shish kebab would be a great dinner meal, and a smoothie for breakfast might be something good for you. I'm a big fan of breakfast. Try not to skip it. And as I mentioned, the smaller meals are better than bigger meals. Look out for your white carbohydrates. That's your man-made carbs. That causes that big glucose sugar spike and again promotes body fat storage. And then probably the last thing I'd like to mention is try not to skip meals. Don't drink soft drinks and energy drinks to bring back your mojo and your energy. Try to plan meals. If you can plan ahead and bring your food in, it's really a good idea. And like I said, don't use energy drinks to pump you up. That's really not a good idea. It's just artificially stimulating your brain. And believe it or not, it causes the stress response over time. So once again, we got a few minutes for any questions if you have some. And next week, we're going to cover aerobic conditioning, cardiovascular health, which we're going to call that heart health. So things like walking and jogging and biking are really good. And in fact, we've got our Trails in Trailblazers group that meets on Wednesday. You can chime in with them from 5:30 to 8:30 and get a virtual tally for participating in cardiovascular health. But we'll tell you more about that next time. I look forward to seeing you. And we've got a question here. Are store-bought pre-made smoothies bad for you? It depends. A lot of times they add a lot of extra sugar to that product. But so if you can get a more natural food product, and you can read on the food label, actually they put a section on the new food label that talks about added sugars. And if you can keep that down to a minimum, that's a really good suggestion for you. So take a look at that food label. All right, let's see, anything else? Looks like we're good to go. Well, I appreciate your time and I look forward to seeing you next week. Invite some friends and we'll see you in our next, oh, hold on. What about smoothies for dinner? If it's fruit-based, I would say maybe do that for breakfast. If you do a vegetable smoothie for dinner and maybe even throw in some protein powder, and again, not all protein powders created equal. Try to get the ones that have your essential amino acids in them. And that would be a great idea. It's also fast. If you're pressed for time, I'd rather you eat something than not eat dinner. Eat dinner like a pauper. That's what our little book says, but still would like you to eat. So, is there a place that I can find a healthy eating brochure online? You know what? We just put one on the Phil Long Healthy Habits website. You can look under that, under the events tab, I believe is where it's at. And we can go over that. In fact, that's the resource that I'll use if you would ever like to analyze your diet with the software that I mentioned in the earlier part of the program. So once again, oh, maybe one more. Let me check, and I might have gone over that already. All right, I think we got everything. Once again, thank you for checking in for a quarter hour of Wellness Power with our virtual coffee chat, and I'll see you next week. Take care, everybody.